and welcome to Changing Times, Changing Worlds show, the Otherworldly, which happens live on Zoom Wednesdays. We do encourage you all to, if you are people who are scattered across the four corners of the earth, feel free to sign up for the virtual track for Changing Times, Changing Worlds in November, because we put it in there for you guys. Also for the teachers, so we can't afford to ship in. But welcome to Otherworldly, and tonight we have Starwolf, and he is going to be talking about potions on a budget, because frankly, people have always done magic with what they could get their hands on. And so,
like I said, you had me at budget.
Yes. And so that is the that is, I think, an important part of what's going on. And I love the description we have of him. He's a shaman, witch, professional psychic, Reiki master, and metaphysical engineer and soldier of fortune, which is, I just think, a wonderful thing. I like that. But so I'm going to kind of turn it over onto him, but there's a little button down the bottom says reactions, and you can put up your hand, or you can just leave something in the chat if you need to get our attention, and then we'll ask you to unmute. So go for it, Starwolf.
Okay. As I was explaining beforehand, this is based, or was inspired by a book that has nothing to do with metaphysics. It was called The $50 Knife Shop, which explained how to basically create a basic setup for you to make knives from steel to finished on a budget, including making your own furnace for heating, tempering, and heat treating metal. We may get into that later, because in case people want to actually make things, but I'm going to start with describing equipment. First and foremost, a place to work. Now, a lot of us live in apartments, so we can't necessarily have a fully dedicated laboratory. If you're lucky, you've got a part of a room or a basement, and if you're really lucky, it's got running water, which is one of the first most important things to have, a source of running water. Even if it's you have to run upstairs from the basement to use the kitchen or the bathroom to get running water, that works. Next, work surface, because you basically want to keep your potion making supplies and equipment quarantined from your culinary equipment, simply because cross-contamination is not a good thing. Whether it's allergies or you're working with herbs that could be toxic if ingested, because some of them are. And you just face it, you don't want to poison people unintentionally. Intentionally, I leave up to you. But so what I've got downstairs, I have what amounts to a kitchen cart, to which I have attached a power strip that then connects through an extension cord to the light over my work area, because that gives me electricity for, one, a heat source, which in this case is a double hot plate, which gives me a nice adjustable double heat source for doing things like boiling water, and also for a small toaster oven, which is useful for drying things, or when you're just doing magical crafting, it's good for setting Fimo clay or melting things. That's the first two. Next thing you need, the obvious tools. For that, hie yourself to IKEA if you've got one. Your local budget store, whether it's Ocean State Job Lot or Dollar Tree. You do not need the fancy Cephalon bought out of Williams Sonoma pots and pans for brewing potions, for the obvious reason that you're eventually going to contaminate them with something that will render them useless. And it's far better to chuck a pan from the dollar store than to have discovered your grandmother's Revereware saucepan is suddenly unusable because something melted down in it. Next item, containers. I know, we witches collect bottles and jars and containers like magpies. And yes, Feather Stitch, thrift stores work just as well. I wouldn't get the hot plate at a thrift store just because you don't know what condition electrically it's in. But the rest, yeah, give them a good washout, make sure. Next, like I said, is containers. If you do have an IKEA nearby, that's an excellent source, especially for big bottles with those Grolsch bottle style stoppers. Also, large mason jar type containers and small mason jar type containers. They're relatively inexpensive because you're going to need to store both not only your finished products, and for that, if you need small containers, I find Dollar Tree often has little 2 or 3 dram bottles, little containers you can use for salves, other material, and other sources of storage for storing bulk herbs. Glass herb jars. If you're indoors, you don't necessarily need the fancy blue light tight ones because you're going to be working under artificial light, which has far less damage to your supplies. Okay, next thing you're going to need, utensils. Once again, this is really where keeping your culinary stuff and your potion stuff isolated. The usual collection of a whisk, couple of large spoons, set of measuring cups, measuring spoons, basically like you're setting up a kitchen, because it is kind of the same. And if you also do brewing, as in, making mead and wine, make sure that's isolated from your potion gear too. You don't want the mandrake to go into the mead. If you're going to do that, find yourself rhododendron honey to make the mead with. That's a famous bit from Eastern Europe. Sweetening things you want to leave behind when the Turks are coming with rhododendron honey will result in far fewer Turks. Also, sources of herbs. I do pretty much all of my foraging at either Ocean State Job Lot for the basic ones like garlic, rosemary, all those two specifically. There's a couple of places online you can buy bulk herbs. If you've got a health food store nearby, they usually have herbs. We have got a huge one down in New Haven called Edge of the Woods, which basically has an entire balcony area devoted to just jar after jar of herbs. So when I need something, I go and I get it. And remember to write what it is on the bags and transfer it into a jar with a label, because labels are important. So once again, you do not mix things up. A good copy of Culpepper's Herbal is useful because that's a good reference book. Let's see, I think I've got also a bucket. And the reason I'm saying a bucket is for you to get rid of excess liquid materials. So if you have brewed up something and you've got more than you have jars for, dump it in your slop bucket, take it upstairs when you're done and empty it down the toilet, because that's one of the better places to get rid of old, unused or out-of-date potions, because it will eventually go through the treatment plant and therefore will not end up getting into the water. Don't pour it straight down the down the kitchen sink because it might not go through the same system, and definitely do not empty them into the storm drains. You never know what you might poison downstream. Okay. Let's see. I said sources. I've done sources. I've done materials. Safety, obviously, a good pair of rubber gloves, preferably lab grade, just in case, and solvents. For the basic one, water for herbs where the volatiles are water soluble. For things that are going to be taken externally, unscented rubbing alcohol, which you can buy pretty much in any pharmacy or at any Dollar Tree for inexpensive. For anything that's meant for human consumption, either strong vodka or grain alcohol, simply because that will not add scent to the whatever you are extracting. Now, you might want to have specific jars labeled for specific extractives. So keep the jar that you're using rubbing alcohol to extract, say, the active ingredients from arnica to make what is called bruise juice, separate from the one that you are using to create an extract or a tincture for something that's meant to be taken internally, because you face it, isopropyl alcohol and the human metabolism is not particularly good.
So what's the cheapest drinkable alcohol? Everclear?
Everclear is actually kind of expensive for the amount you get.
Oh,
It tends to, you're probably better off buying bottom shelf vodka. Just go for something that says grain neutral spirits in it, and that's cheaper, because you're going to want to dilute the
If you
stuff
know,
anyhow.
if you know a
You know, and
moonshiner, Everclear is a good deal. If you don't,
Yeah.
well,
yeah, basically buy it, but plus the fact that they only sell it in half pints, at least up here, which means if you need to make a lot, it's going to get expensive.
oh, we used to buy it by the liter, so I
Those
haven't,
those
but I haven't
days
bought it
are-
recently.
Yeah, Everclear, Graves, let's see, Smirnoff vodka, which is not made in Russia, and it's actually made in the United States, and it's basically, that's about as bottom shelf as you can get and still remain drinkable. The one problem with buying your alcohol from a moonshiner is there may still be wood alcohol in it. If they're trying to maximize their yield, they may not get rid of the top and the tail, which is also one of the reasons that Applejack made by freezing tends to give you a bigger headache than, say, apple brandy, because you don't get rid of the fusel oil and the wood alcohol, which, once again, safety. Trying to make this work for people. And like I said, mine is pretty much set up on a kitchen cart, which I must admit took me quite a while to find one about the right size. But because that gives you a work surface on top, then you can store tools and equipment on the shelves underneath. Now, if you have a dedicated work surface that's a cabinet, even better. The other thing you're going to need will be a place to store your herb bottles, and if you can get an inexpensive wall rack, that will work. Put up a shelving unit if there's room. The whole idea of this is not only is it supposed to be inexpensive, it's also supposed to be relatively compact. Indeed, the most expensive thing you probably will be the kitchen cart. And as I said, herbs, well, you either order online, if you have options to wildcraft, very definitely. Basically, my backyard, as some people know, is basically a large summer greens salad composed of plantains and chickweed and dandelions, and that's where I get mine, though I don't do much of that because I leave most of it for the bunnies and the chipmunks that live in my backyard. Unfortunately, dandelion season is over, so I no longer get to watch the bunnies eating dandelion stalks like spaghetti. Exactly. Other things you're going to need. If you're going to be making salves to be applied, oddly enough, one of the best bases is Crisco. I know that sounds weird, but it's if you're going to macerate things in it, maceration is just low temperature frying to begin with, because you want to, unlike real frying where you want it to get crispy and no grease, you want the herb to be saturated with the grease so it will release its oils. But it's, once again, it's neutral. It's relatively inexpensive. I mean, really all it is hydrolyzed, some sort of vegetable oil. It liquefies at skin temperature, and it's still relatively stable at normal room temperatures. If you want it a little more solid, you mix a little beeswax in with it when you're melting it, and that will make it a little more stable. But it gives you a basic extractive material, because there are, as far as if you really want to get fancy and you want to go well over budget, you go to American Science and Surplus and you buy one of their $150 lab grade distilling setups. I don't own one of them, but it basically looks like something out of a high school, and it's all the borosilicate glass, which if you want to go from looking like a kitchen to looking like a laboratory, that's also a good source for lab glassware. Inexpensive, made in China, borosilicate, the kind that you see in pretty much every high school that still lets their kids play with chemicals.
What's it called again?
American Science and Surplus.
Oh.
Or Scientific and Surplus. I get their catalog 3 or 4 times a year. You go to their lab section and they have all of the flasks and the beakers and the test tubes and all the things you need to make yourself look like the kitchen witch married the mad scientist. But specifically, they have, like I said, inexpensive distilling setups.
And who doesn't want that?
Exactly, because you can do all sorts of things with the distilling setup other than just, I mean, you can make your own perfumes. You can make, because of the size, small amounts of your own alcohol. Pour some cheap Chardonnay into the boiling flask. At the
image, it looks like Edwards Scientific.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Edwards doesn't seem to exist anymore. But
I wonder if they turned into this.
Could be. But like I said, that's where I get a lot of weird little. It's also a good source for magnets if you want them, because I use a lot of magnets in what I build. Excuse me. So that gives you, the main problem with that is most of them use a water jacket. So you need, once again, you need kind of a source of running water to keep the thing cool. So you may have to do a little creative plumbing, perhaps standing a bucket with a tap in it up, running a hose down to the intake, and then running another hose into your slop bucket from the outflow, so that basically it's going to look like you're cooling an old-fashioned Maxim machine gun that way, but it works. Okay, quick time check. It's let's check chats. Okay. Yep. American Science and Surplus. Like I said, I haven't gotten an Edmund Scientific catalog in decades, but I still get, yes, that's the one. That's my baby. I mean, if you really want to get fancy with the distilling, Hammacher Schlemmer actually sells stills, but they run about $1,500, and I think that's beyond the pockets of most of us.
Yeah, we're here for cheap.
And besides, that's actually made for you to do things that the
Erlenmeyer flask. Oh my God.
yeah
I gotta stop looking at this. I
Yes,
just thought
yes.
I put the link.
Erlenmeyer
in. Yeah.
Erlenmeyer flasks, every size of test tubes. And if you want to start teaching potion brewing to your kids, they also have stuff that you can't heat, but will take boiling liquids in the form of, they've got some of the flasks and things in plastic. Or if the kids just want to play science, get them a couple of those and a box of food colorings and let them go to town. Okay.
Okay,
The
back
other
to
thing-
oh, you know what I forgot to get you to do?
What?
Define potion.
Okay. Potion for me is pretty much anything designed to have a either metaphysical or health effect that you make yourself. So basically, you've got potions, which are usually have a water base. Tinctures, which are usually either alcohol or vinegar based. I don't like vinegar based ones. I find they taste nasty. And this is coming from a man who will eat sauerkraut out of the jar. But decoctions, which are kind of like teas or tisanes if you really want to get fancy. Then there are salves, which are obviously for topical and are usually some sort of fat containing either an herbal extract or the raw, dried, or fresh herbs chopped up and ground up fine and mixed in and heated. If you're doing it that way, you can keep stirring it and you can do the double bubble toil and trouble routine if you want to. So at that point, you get a couple of the plastic of the lab glasswares, and if you're doing it, online, you do that while having colored liquids with a little bit of dry ice in them bubbling in the background.
It's fun.
Yes. Though I wouldn't use a lot of dry ice if you're in a basement because CO2 is heavier than air and will build up.
Right.
Try driving back from Vermont with a box full of Ben and Jerry's, and they packed it in dry ice for us. We stopped every 40 or 50 miles and just made sure I popped the trunk to make sure it got out.
Yeah, because you could just like bury yourself in
Yeah, it didn't feel
carbon
like falling asleep
dioxide.
and never waking up.
Yeah.
Safety, once again, like I said, a good pair of lab grade gloves or even just plain rubber kitchen gloves is useful. And if you want to, break down and buy a box of the disposable nitriles. Oh, one item I forgot to mention. A couple of mortars, as in mortar and pestle, as opposed to mortar, fill it with gunpowder and go bang. Because once again, you're going to want to have the ones used for inedible herbs isolated from the ones that are supposed to be using edible herbs. That's something I learned when I was working in the basement of the Magical Child ages ago, basically mixing everything that if you ever buy a copy of Herman Slater's A Magical Formulary, that's basically the recipe book from the basement of the Magical Child. Which is what kind of got me into this. Because that's what I was doing as a teenager. That was my part-time job. Working for the most successful commercial witch in New York City. Also, next part. A lot of the recipes you see will not give exact measurements. They will have it by parts, especially if you're working from, for example, Herman's book or Scott Cunningham's or Lady Rhea's. She does a very good one on oils, by the way. They list things as parts. Well, the answer is you simply decide what one part is going to be, whether it is going to be a teaspoon, a tablespoon, a 1 quart measuring cup for some of the stuff we used to make, and that becomes your parts. Okay, that's covered most of the stuff that you're going to put on or in yourself. Now, incenses. That's another thing. Incense, you need not just herbs. How I was taught to do it is you need to get a relatively neutral, like birch or white pine sawdust. You're going to need to grind it very fine and mix in very finely ground saltpeter. That gives you your base. Yes, Lady Rhea, she runs, she still has a store in Brooklyn. I was hoping to meet her at Hexfest 2 years ago, but life and COVID got in the way. Yes. Horrible Herman, my one of my first teachers. Taught me a bunch of other things too, but none not applicable here. But okay, back to making incense. Basically a base, like I said, ours was basically sawdust, saltpeter, and if you want colors, dye the sawdust first. Food coloring makes an excellent choice because it doesn't add anything to the smell. So what you'll do is you'll partially fill a container with the sawdust. You will add your food coloring. If you're making a lot, you're probably going to be using you're probably going to want to get your food coloring from a culinary supply where you can get it not in the little dropper bottles, but in the big jars. Mix it up. I tend to use cut down cardboard boxes lined with towel paper for drying. So you spread it out as evenly as possible. And hopefully, if your house is relatively dry, just make sure you stir it every day or so until it's dry to make sure it doesn't mildew. Or if you have a gas oven specifically, leave it on the top rack of your oven with just the pilot light on. Don't bother to actually turn the oven on unless you're going to want to do it quickly, and then you've got to keep watching it so nothing burns. In which case, invest in a couple of cheap baking pans as opposed to cardboard boxes. But for that, you're going to have to pull them out regularly and stir to make sure, just like you're trying to not burn a sauce or something you're browning, you're going to need to make sure it doesn't burn. Otherwise, your house is going to smell like a smokehouse. And having used some of those smoker bags, it's nice, but it doesn't work for me anymore. Not with Kathy's asthma. Okay, and that will give you your base. Then you mix in the finely powdered saltpeter. For powdering that, a wooden mortar and pestle is best. Our beautiful stone ones or metal ones, not a good idea. Too much friction. Saltpeter can be amazingly volatile depending on what the weather is like. And understand, once you've mixed up your base, you need to keep stuff in airtight jars because saltpeter specifically is what they call hygroscopic, which means it will suck moisture out of the air. Okay, quick check for questions. Yeah, I suppose if you have a warming setting on your oven, you could use that.
When we are dehydrating, like making jerky and stuff, we put it on the lowest possible setting, and then we put a wooden spoon in the door to hold it open.
exactly.
And our oven will actually go down as low as like 180 degrees. So
Only because I'm not quite sure what the ignition point of the sawdust would be, because sawdust is considerably more flammable than solid wood.
how about
You-
paper? Paper is 451. Sawdust probably is in that range or higher.
Okay, so do not put it on broil.
No,
But
bad idea.
yeah,
But I can
also
easily,
from experience, do not fill a roasting pan with sherry and leave the oven closed while you're baking meat or roasting meat. That was a bad idea.
ooh, but otherwise our oven would actually
Yeah,
allow a heating in the 200 to 250-degree range, which is a
yeah.
little below or a little above the boiling point.
Well, that would definitely drive the moisture that is probably the water that is the vehicle of the food coloring out. Now,
Right.
understand, you're going to have to use a lot because you're mixing it with something relatively pale. Just like if you're mixing it with a salt, it's going to get very pale. Bright red food coloring mixed, say, with salt, which is another material you can buy in bulk at the grocery store, just buy kosher salt. Now, I believe the last box I bought was like $2 for a 3-pound box,
Yep.
and that
And
lasts me quite a while.
Featherstitch is being a spoil sport and pointing out that the oven I'm talking about doesn't matter after you move out of this apartment in a relatively short time, but
Yep.
I needed to know for technical reasons because I'm an engineer.
Okay.
Right.
But like I said, you don't want to fill the house with smoke and set off the smoke detectors. Indeed, when you engage in brewing, pull the battery out of your smoke detector or turn it off if that's possible, because you never know. It's kind of like cooking. You can have sudden smoke, you can have steam. I have to disconnect our smoke detector every time I make pasta because the steam sets it off. Thankfully, it's not wired into a phone system. But like I said, it's the other thing. If you need colored salts, food coloring plus kosher salt, it's perfect.
And
Now,
the reason that you're putting food coloring in your incense is so you know what smell you're going to get. What it's to keep track of which one they are by in a quick pick.
yeah, and because and because that's how I was taught it. You basically color code your incense bases, and you can make up your own color coding.
It's like when Willow does her various salves, she will put different very strong scented herbs in. For instance, the oops ointment gets clove so that she can grab jar and sniff it, and even in the dark she can tell you
Yeah,
which salve she's found.
yeah. I mean, one of those old-fashioned label makers where that impresses things onto a strip of plastic if they're
I
still
got that.
available. Those are also useful, and you put them on the jar lid so that you can find the same thing. You know, but let's see, I've covered salves, salts. As I said, having different mortars,
You didn't
preferably one.
say how to make salves though. And
Okay, sorry,
people
I'm sorry.
think it's like rocket science, and it's really
No, it's a lot of this is like if you've mastered basic kitchen skills, you can make a salve. What you do is you take one of your pots, you load your whatever fat you're using. Like I said, I favor Crisco because of its neutrality. But if you really want to get crazy, you can get hydrogenated lard at a lot of grocery stores. You can use actual pork lard, not suet if you feel like rendering it yourself. And
I like olive oil. I don't like
olive oil
almond.
is,
I don't like almond because too many people have allergies.
yep, and olive oil is good. Any basic inexpensive cooking oil will work. You fill it depending on how much you want to make. You add your herbs and you stir, and then you heat it slowly. You don't want to fry the stuff. What you want to do is heat it up to, I'd say probably about 150, 160 degrees if you're using a candy thermometer to measure. You want it warm enough that the volatile oils in the herbs will come out of the herbs. Oh, that's another thing you're going to need. Strainers and oh God, I can't remember that. The thing you use to pour liquid into a bottle.
Funnel.
Funnels. Once again, you can buy those at dollar stores. And some relatively large containers to basically pour your strained materials in, because you're not always going to want to incorporate the herbs into whatever salve or oil you're making. Now understand, these are not essential oils. These are a hell of a lot safer to use on human skin, because that you could, if you want, buy essential oils, though they tend to be rather expensive, and you got to make sure you're not getting reconfigured coal tar, and just dilute it in a carrier oil. So either olive oil, don't buy the really fragrant extra bright green extra virgin. You want the inexpensive yellow, doesn't have a whole lot of center flavor, bought at Ocean State Job Lot or Dollar Tree cooking grade olive oil.
Wegmans.
Yeah. The most inexpensive olive oil or olive oil blend you can get. But with blends, check and make sure whatever the other oil is, usually it'll either be canola or corn. Now, if this is going to be something taken externally, most people will not break out, but once again, you got to make sure, because there are people who are developing allergies specifically to canola oil and to soybean oil.
You can get allergies to anything you're overexposed to, which is why so many people have corn allergies.
Exactly. And the same problem being with Crisco, because that's mostly hydrogenated soybean oil. So, but as I said, when making the salve, okay, once you've let it cook for 15, 20 minutes, you'll notice, because you'll start smelling your herbs. Now, if this is, like I said, let it cook about 15, 20 minutes, then turn off the heat, let it cool down to room temperature. And then if you don't want the herbs incorporated into the mixture, you take a bowl that you have specifically for working with herbs, a strainer, and you line it with either towel paper or cheesecloth, and you slowly pour it through. I mean, coffee filters also work very well, and they're relatively inexpensive. Just get the unbleached ones. And you can use that to filter out. Indeed, a small strainer lined with a coffee filter is an excellent substitute for a more expensive one. It's also very good in a water purification kit too, because it lets you get the mud out of the water before you throw in the iodine pills. But quick check of time. Oh, 20 minutes. So okay, once you've let it cool, bottle it, jar it. Once again, if you're not working outside, you can pretty much keep it stored someplace away from direct sunlight, because it'll do weird things to stuff. Then if you want to turn it into a salve, if you haven't already used a fat that is solid at room temperature, so if you have been using olive oil, you heat your fat and you incorporate as much of the extracted oil into the fat as you want. Crisco works. If you want to get really old-fashioned, like I said, lard. And lard is, Crisco is just vegetable-based lard. I'd stay away from the fat of virgin babies or unbaptized babies because that's
What?
really hard. It's hard to find, and people tend to get real. They charge ridiculous amounts, for even a small amount.
And you can still go to jail for that.
Well, I don't say you have to kill them. You just need to have a source. But yeah,
I think you're on thin ice with that one.
yeah. So Crisco works better.
Yeah.
But
When you're dealing with a budget, yes, stick with the grocery
Yeah.
store stuff.
And avoid things that require huge legal fees.
or that require parts that are no longer necessarily available, such as the formula from Macbeth.
Well, that would leads me to another question, which is there's a lot of these things which you can hear in Macbeth or something, and they're really not that
Not the physical bits. They are not the
renamed them.
They are not the liver of a blaspheming Jew or the nose of Turk and Tartar's lips.
Well, you could also go for the formula from Bartholomew and the Oobleck. Burn a long sour lizard skin, burn a whisker from your chin.
Yeah.
These may be more accessible.
If you have a friend that has an iguana that sheds regularly or a snake that sheds regularly, that's a good source.
I'm just saying that a lot of these newt's eyes are tended to be. What was there's an herb. It's now I've forgotten.
I'd have to check either my formulary or Ravens, because that's another good source for herbals. Raven Caldera's Northern Shaman Herbal. For that matter, Dr. Jane Sibley's book on herbs is also useful.
Well, we've heard of her.
Yeah, gee,
I even know her.
I wonder what connection she has with this organization.
Other than being an essential member?
Yeah. So that will give you where was I? One of these years I have to write class notes. But as I said, when you're back to making salve, and then once you have everything combined, if you want something more solid, beeswax, specifically, especially if you know somebody who keeps bees, they're usually giving it away.
Beeswax, they're giving it away.
Well, some of the beekeepers I know do.
And some of them don't, because some of them don't have the structure or connections to get the goods out to the places they need to go.
Yeah. But things I wouldn't use, if you have a source of bayberry wax, don't waste it. Use it to make nicely scented candles.
I found it. I have known as mustard seed.
Okay. That's useful because if anybody wants a prophetic potion of dubious veracity and accuracy, but let's see, other ingredients that they're somewhat harder to find. Some of the banefuls, for example, there you're getting into, once again, legal ithies. I mean, if you're going to make a flying ointment, be very careful. Most of the stuff there is not illegal, but applied improperly it'll send you not necessarily on a trip to the other worlds. It will send you on a trip to the hospital. Too much belladonna and mandrake in the mix, and does really weird things to your heart.
Bad idea.
Yeah, but just in case, and once again, make sure if you have a source, good. Just make sure your bottles are labeled and anything that's in it is labeled. Oddly enough, the herb store near me does sell chopped up mandrake. Some of the weirder or for example, Datura, which is used in a lot of southwestern shamanic preparations. Well, the good news is it tends to grow wild, and most cops don't know what it looks like, and it has all these beautiful flowers. So if you want to craft your own, a nice bed of purple and white Datura flowers, or if you get one of the climbing ones, if you live in a climate that's warm enough, they're beautiful.
Oh, hey,
Just-
we got, what do you use mandrake for? Because they have some.
It tends to be in some of the European hallucinogenic preparations. You can also use it, and this is for information only. It can be used basically to help slow the heart, but I wouldn't give somebody who's having an anxiety attack a cup of mandrake tea. It would slow the heart a little too much. So I would suggest just hang on to it in case you want to make a good old-fashioned European witch's flying ointment. So that's the same for, belladonna and nightshade and the rest. If you're getting into poisons, quite honestly, all you need is a garden and a bunch of tomato plants if you're looking for deadly nightshade. Though, if you want to make a good, inexpensive weed or bug killer, basically boil a pack of cigarettes in a pot of water, carefully decant the remaining liquid, dilute it, and you've got a relatively good pesticide. Just don't spray it anywhere that the bees will get to it, because basically what you've just created is a nicotine solution, which, by the way, if taken internally, will kill you way faster than the cigarettes will. Or for that matter, tomato or potato leaves, dried and boiled down, are a source, as they are also nightshades. For that matter, peppers. I'm talking sweet peppers here, not hot peppers. They are also members of the nightshade family. So you have all this wonderful source. You do not need deadly nightshade. If you need something with a little less bite to it. Though apparently tomato leaves incorporated in a salad in 18th or 19th century Italy was kind of a way of getting rid of an inconvenient husband.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
And one of the uses of especially the climbing flower Daturas in India is likewise, it's a cure for an abusive husband.
As we are 10 minutes from the end of the
questions?
hour, that's time. Call for questions. There's a
Yes.
potion that you were hoping to hear about. I did mention for Thieves Vinegar, and so I put my very simplified view of it on the event announcement in the discussion section.
Yep.
I suppose I could put it here. It's really kind of short. It's a lot shorter once I took the stuff out.
It's a wonderful solution. It's for house cleaning. Combine it with olive oil, and you get a reasonably decent salad dressing.
I like it.
Yep.
But the major thing is there's 2,200 versions of it on the internet. The most important part is the cloves of garlic, rosemary, sage, and also cloves and some form of mugwort, wormwood.
Whereas
And
mine
after that,
is
there is so much variety.
garlic, rosemary, lavender, and rue.
Rue is good for because it's a bug repellent. So
Oh, the 4 Thieves Vinegar. Yeah, okay.
Basically, it Also, large quantities of, if you are using vinegar, just get gallon jugs of your basic cider vinegar at the supermarket. It's
Mhm.
inexpensive. Don't use white vinegar, works a little bit better, but it's not really for drinking straight.
No, it's not. It's really great for getting scale off toilets, though.
Yeah,
Just leave that, turn off the flusher and let it sit in, white vinegar sit in overnight.
Yep.
And great effect.
and if your
But-
cat has an unfortunate incident, great for getting rid of the smell.
Oh, with the
Yes.
skunk? Yeah.
Oh, no, well, animal,
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
if they pee all over everything?
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, for
And now-
skunk, it's still the go-to still remains tomato juice.
right,
I guess the one thing that I would throw in here is sterilizing things. Anything
I
you're going to be ingesting, especially if you're sick.
Yeah.
I like hydrogen peroxide for
Yeah.
sterilizing the bottles.
And of course, there's always just the good old-fashioned, really, really hot water.
yes.
That's why if you have a water source in your work area, that's really good, because it means you don't have to constantly run upstairs to the kitchen to boil, sterilize your bottles.
Right.
Now, just for storing herbs, just make sure if you're reusing bottles, just make sure you've washed them out properly
Mhm.
before you use them.
Now,
um,
Starwolf,
Yes?
I realize that if I ask you for a potion for old age, you'll just laugh at me.
Yeah.
But ravages of old age, like sore joints, and
Oh, God. I
That
would
sounds-
suggest a decoction of willow bark and birch leaves.
okay. Otherwise, I have found,
Otherwise known as aspirin.
yeah, right. Jen gave me some arnica the other night
Yeah, that's
and the peculiar thing I found that was really interesting was that I still had an ache in my knees, but the burning pain went away.
arnica it's also very good for bruises. Just never take anything containing arnica internally. It has a nasty side effect in that it turns off the body's natural thermostat, and your body temperature goes up to the point where your brains become cervelle.
Oh, or pate foie gras.
No, that's the liver.
Yeah, I know. But
Cervelle's Italian cooked calf's brains, something I don't eat.
neither would I. But I found that interesting that it did help, and it got me functional for a while. But I am interested in anything that we might brew up that, homeopathic arnica.
Yeah, the
safe and
homeopathic arnica will work because there is so little in it that it's not going to kill you. But
right,
at that
and
point,
I just stuff 4 tablets under my tongue and lie back.
if we're doing homeopathics, I'd also add silica to your brew, to the mix.
Oh, really?
That's good. It's good for joints and rebuilding cartilage.
Okay.
I
Um,
like a lot of the homeopathics, but we're not making those.
Yeah,
You
that
can?
requires way more equipment than you're going to have in your basement.
Oh,
Well, no, it doesn't. It
me.
doesn't necessarily require the equipment, but it takes a long time and it's a pain in the tushy.
Yeah, it's far
You
easier to go
can't-
to a health food store and buy biorons.
You can't just do a 10,000 to 1 dilution in your kitchen? No.
You do. Okay. This is one of the things you can do as I'm going to be doing this in I've proposed it as a thing for changing times, changing worlds, but how to make that kind of neutralizing. It's but that's not Starwolf's potions. So back to our master
The main problem with making your own homeopathics is it's time consuming.
potions.
Right. And I was thinking more of potions, which could be decoctions or extractions or
Yeah,
combinations.
I would suggest for aching joints just homeopathic arnica, maybe some calendula, because there may be some nerve damage mixed in
Mm.
and some silica. I'm also a
Well,
lay homeopath.
Got
Mostly
anything
self-taught.
for,
Calendula is good because I do have peripheral neuropathy.
That'll help it.
Okay. Point taken.
Yep.
how about
The nice
Lyme,
part about
Lyme
homeopathy
disease?
is you can't poison people.
What
Lyme
about
disease?
Lyme disease? What do
That
you
one
got
I'd
for
have to
Lyme?
look up.
Because I've been doing the Japanese knotweed. So many of the invasives are actual volunteers trying to help people with whatever is the current. It's like willow grows where malaria circulates.
Right.
And where Lyme is a big problem, you get the knotweed growing. Kudzu,
Yeah.
which is a specific for against alcoholism, is all over. A lot of
all
these
over the-
invasives are
Even though it's trying to eat
volunteers.
the South, it is a useful vegetable, useful herb, and I believe the Japanese make a culinary starch out of it as well.
Yeah.
Really?
But they've got the people who, or the animals that will eat the bloody stuff.
But if you have something that shows up in your yard and you've
Yeah.
never seen it before, go find a little book and look it up, because it's probably something that came to you because it says, "Can I help you?" I
And
don't-
the young
I
shoots of
have,
Japanese knotweed also make a nice substitute for asparagus.
And I do look now to see if suddenly something is growing where I wouldn't expect it. And I kind of file that away with the same thing as when I find a raven sitting on a power line over my driveway, yelling at me like
Mhm.
Odin has just sent me a howler.
Yes. Okay,
Louise,
you
did
have
you have
something?
something?
Louise had something.
yeah, I have morning glory growing everywhere. So I've been, I haven't had a chance to look that up, but I don't know health wise if it can, I've
Okay,
tried to get rid of it. It keeps coming up, keeps coming back. I'm like, it clearly
Well,
wants me to use it for
morning
something.
glory seeds are, among other things, a natural source of lysergic acid, if that helps.
Yeah, we know about that, but
What kind of acid?
lysergic acid.
LSD, the original acid.
Oh, maybe it's telling me to take some more mind exploring retreats. I don't know, but
Okay, the first thing that comes up for medicinal uses for morning glory, it's to combat the effects of stress.
oh yeah,
That would
that's
make sense.
definitely number one on my list. Yeah.
And depression.
Got
So-
some stress,
Oh.
Louise.
Okay.
Just don't consume the seeds. I'm
Oh, don't
assuming
consume. Okay.
it's probably the leaves.
But or
Hmm.
or even the flowers, you can take them and make a tea.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
nice.
That's not going to
Okay.
send you anywhere.
And regarding the joints, you could. A friend of mine made a salve with wintergreen oil, and
Mhm.
That would work.
some good results with that for the achy
Yeah.
joints, like
That
a
would cool-
liniment.
that would act like a cooling,
Yeah, that would be a good
Something-
one. I'd vote for that.
helping
But
to cool the
I have
heat out of it.
glaucoma, so if you have glaucoma, don't try to stay away from wintergreen. But I think it depends maybe on like how often you would.
And once again, the difference between internally and externally.
Right.
Right. Externally
mean-
would be safe. If you take it internally, you should probably visit your ophthalmologist more often
Yeah.
to check your intraocular pressure.
Mhm.
It's just like grapefruit juice will neutralize certain medications, but grapefruit skin rubbed on your own skin can substitute as an exfoliant, because
Oh.
the acid will cause a certain small amount of peeling.
And it's
Oh,
not
nice.
it's not the liquid with the active ingredient. It
Right.
interferes with the liver's cytochrome
Yeah.
enzymes that process things.
Though do
Hmm.
understand, anything you put on your skin in large quantities will end up in your bloodstream.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our,
If
our
you don't
science
believe
teacher
me-
used to do that. He would grind up some what is it called, garlic, and have
Yeah.
somebody
Oh.
put their big toe in it, and then he'd have people breathe, have her breathe on them in 15 minutes, and
Mhm.
Right.
it's
And
gone.
the other classic is you put 1 drop of peppermint oil on someone's foot and wait until they taste peppermint.
I love that.
It
Right.
takes
Now,
about
Okay,
is
well,
that-
10
it is
minutes.
time
that
for us to
physical-
thank Starwolf because
Yep.
Yeah.
he's always very prompt. So
Yes, and
Yep.
very informative.
I
and
tried in my
masses of
rambling way.
Well,
he's
masses
going
of
to he'll
experience.
be at Changing Times, Changing Worlds, teaching Grunwalder and stuff. Do look at the website and
Mhm.
and consider and figure out whether you want to. There's some great come-ons to
Yep.
reserving this month. Like for instance, you can next year you get the same price as next year, no matter what happens.
Mhm.
And I unfortunately must depart.
You must, but thank
Well,
you.
Thank
You all have a
you.
good evening for the rest of it, and hopefully see you at Changing
night.
Tides.
Yep.
Absolutely.